The space station was a place where worlds collided. Located at the center of the galaxy, it was a hub for countless alien species, all united by one thing: trade. But today, the protagonist, a young human diplomat named Mark, was summoned to a meeting that would change his life forever. Mark had been stationed here for months, learning the ways of intergalactic diplomacy. He had seen all sorts of beings: towering, armored aliens with 3 eyes, small insect-like creatures that scuttled across the floor, and graceful beings with wings that fluttered like the softest breeze. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to witness. He entered the meeting room, a large space with high ceilings and smooth metallic walls. At the center of the room stood a tall, imposing alien leader, his deep blue skin shimmering under the dim light. The alien's name was General Kalor, a powerful figure in the galaxy who had made his mark by dominating the trade routes with his ruthless strategies. "Mark, welcome," Kalor said, his voice low and commanding. "I have a gift for you." Mark raised an eyebrow. He wasn't sure what to expect. Gifts were common in the galaxy, but they often came with strings attached. This was no ordinary gift, he quickly realized. Kalor gestured to a figure standing in the corner of the room. As she stepped forward, Mark's heart skipped a beat. She was beautiful, strikingly so. Her long dark hair cascaded down her back, like a waterfall. Her skin shimmered in a soft violet hue, and her eyes gleamed with an intensity that made Mark feel like she could see right through him. But it was her posture that left him speechless. She stood tall, yet her hands were shackled, in chains. "Her name is Lyra," Kalor continued, "and she is a gift from my people to you." Mark blinked, confused. "A gift?" Kalor nodded, a wicked smile curling on his lips. "She is a symbol of our alliance, a token of peace. You'll find that she's quite special." Mark didn't know what to say. His eyes remained fixed on Lyra, who stood motionless, her expression a mix of defiance and resignation. She didn't speak a word, but the look in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. She didn't want to be here. "Why is she in chains?" Mark asked, his voice sharper than he intended. Kalor's smile faded for a moment, his gaze darkening. "She's not fully compliant with the law of her people, but that doesn't matter now. She's yours, as a token of our peace agreement." Mark felt a wave of unease wash over him. This wasn't a gift, it was a transaction. Lyra wasn't being given freely. She was being used as leverage. "I'm not sure I understand," Mark said, taking a step closer. "You can't just give me a person." Kalor's eyes narrowed. "You'll understand in time. For now, take her. Treat her well, and she will be useful." Mark felt a pit form in his stomach. There was something wrong here. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being played, and Lyra was the pawn. Kalor turned and left without another word, leaving Mark alone with the alien woman. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Mark looked at her, unsure of what to say. Lyra's eyes locked with his, but she didn't speak. There was a sadness in her gaze, but also a fire, a quiet strength that Mark found hard to ignore. "Are you all right?" Mark asked, his voice gentle. He didn't expect an answer, but he had to ask. Lyra blinked, her lips pressing together into a thin line. "I've been better," she said quietly, her voice soft but steady. "But I'm alive for now." Mark felt his heart go out to her. He wasn't sure who she was or what she had done, but he could see that she didn't belong in chains. "No, one did." "I'm sorry," he said, taking a cautious step closer. "I didn't ask for this. I don't think this is right." Lyra didn't respond, but her eyes softened for a moment. "What do you plan to do with me?" she asked, her voice filled with a mix of curiosity and caution. Mark ran a hand through his hair, frustration building inside him. He didn't know. He had no idea what he was supposed to do now. He had been sent here to negotiate peace, not to deal with this, but somehow he couldn't turn his back on her. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I can't just leave you here." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "And what will you do about it?" "They'll hunt you if you try to free me. You'll be branded A traitor. Mark felt a chill run down his spine at the cold truth in her words. He had known that the situation was dangerous, but hearing it from her made it real. I don't care, he said, surprising himself. You don't deserve this. You deserve freedom. Lyra shook her head slowly, the chains rattling softly. You're a fool, human. If you try to free me, they will hunt you too. You will be marked for death and there will be nowhere to hide. Mark swallowed hard, but he stood firm. I can't live with myself if I don't try. For the first time since meeting her, Lyra's expression softened. She seemed to consider his words for a long moment. Then with a deep sigh she spoke again. Then you are a fool, she said softly. But a foolish one nonetheless. Mark didn't know what to say. He didn't care about the consequences. All he cared about was that Lyra didn't deserve to be chained, and he would do whatever it took to set her free. As the door to the room slid shut behind them, the weight of the situation settled in. The chase had just begun. Mark didn't sleep that night. His mind was racing with 100 thoughts, each more troubling than the last. The decision he had to make loomed over him like a storm cloud, threatening to break. Lyra had made it clear, if he tried to free her, the consequences would be dire. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized he couldn't just let her stay in chains. The next morning, Mark found himself pacing the small, sterile room that had been assigned to him. Lyra was sitting in the corner, her chains rattling with every subtle movement. She looked calm, but Mark could see the tension in her shoulders. It was clear she was a woman who had been through a great deal of suffering. Do you want to talk about it? Mark asked, stopping near her. Lyra didn't respond right away. Her eyes studied him for a moment as though weighing his sincerity. Then she spoke softly, her voice steady despite the clear bitterness in her words. There's nothing to talk about. You've seen it all. You know what I am and what they made me. She glanced at her chains. I've been a prisoner for longer than I can remember. I'm used to it. Mark felt his heart tighten at the sadness in her voice. He had never been in a situation like this before. His life had always been simple, diplomatic missions, small talk, peace treaties, but this was different. This was a real personal struggle. That's not true, Mark said, shaking his head. You're not just a prisoner, you're a person, and you deserve more than this. Lyra's eyes softened slightly, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she looked down at the ground. Mark had seen enough to know that words weren't always the answer. Sometimes actions spoke louder. Mark took a deep breath. I'm going to get you out of here. Lyra's head snapped up, her expression unreadable. You're crazy, she said sharply, her voice rising for the first time. You have no idea what you're getting into. They'll hunt you down. You'll be marked as a traitor and no one will help you. You won't even be safe in your own skin. Mark met her gaze, his resolve hardening. I don't care. I can't. Just stand by and do nothing. I'm not going to let them use you as a tool for their politics. Lyra seemed to consider this for a long moment, her eyes flickering with a mix of disbelief and something else, something he couldn't quite place. You're an idealist, she said finally, her voice softer. You think you can just change things with the force of your will, but you can't. People like Kalor, they don't care about peace. They only care about power. And if you try to stop them, you'll become a target, and me too. I'm just a pawn in this game. You can't save me. Mark knelt down in front of her, taking her hands gently in his own. Her chains rattled as he touched her, but she didn't pull away. She didn't resist. She simply stared at him, her expression unreadable. I don't believe that, Mark said quietly. I can't just give up. There's always a way. If we fight together, maybe we can stop him. Maybe we can change things. For the first time since meeting her, Lyra seemed to soften. She took a deep breath and looked away, her gaze distant, as though she were lost in thought. You don't understand, she said slowly. This is bigger than both of us. Kalor's people, they control everything. They control the trade routes, the weapons, the very law that governs this part of the galaxy. You can't win against that, and I've been through too much to believe in miracles. Mark didn't let go of her hands. I don't believe in miracles, either, he said firmly. But I believe in doing what's right. And right now what's right is getting you out of here. Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and something else. Hope, maybe, but it was fleeting. It was gone almost as soon as it appeared. She turned her face away, staring out the small window of the room, where the stars were just beginning to appear in the sky. You don't know what you're asking for, she murmured. The moment you help me, they'll come after you. And it won't stop. They'll hunt you until they find you. You'll never be safe again. Mark squeezed her hands tighter, determined not to back down. I'm not scared. Not anymore. There was a long silence between them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Lyra seemed to be weighing his words, considering his stubbornness with the quiet patience of someone who had seen too many battles fought and lost. Finally, she spoke again, her voice soft and resigned. If you want to free me, then you need to move fast. The longer you wait, the harder it will be to escape, and if they catch us, it won't be just your life they take. Mark's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't going to be easy, but there was no turning back now. He had made his decision, and he wasn't going to let fear stop him from doing what he knew was right. I'm ready, Mark said. I'll do whatever it takes. Lyra looked at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Mark thought she might say something else, something that would change everything. But she didn't. Instead, she simply nodded. Then let's move quickly, she said. Time is running out. Mark stood up and moved toward the door, determination burning in his chest. He wasn't sure how this would end. He didn't know if he would survive. But one thing was certain. He wasn't going to leave her behind. The first step of their journey had begun, and from here on out there was no turning back. The escape was not as simple as Mark had hoped. It was harder than he had imagined, and time was running out. As he moved swiftly through the narrow corridors of the space station, he couldn't help but feel the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He had promised to help Lyra, but now that they were about to break out of their confinement, everything seemed more dangerous than ever. The station was a maze of dark hallways and empty rooms, and the slightest wrong turn could lead them straight into the hands of those who wanted to stop them. Mark had no real plan. He had never been involved in something like this before, an escape from powerful forces running from enemies who controlled everything. But he had made up his mind. He couldn't leave Lyra in chains. She deserved to be free, and he wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her. Lyra, walking silently beside him, didn't speak. She moved with the quiet grace of someone who had been trained for this kind of life, someone used to sneaking around and avoiding the watchful eyes of powerful enemies. Her chains were still on her wrists, but she had taken the opportunity to slip off the heavy shackles. The thin bracelets that remained weren't as loud or obvious, but they still clinked whenever she moved. How much farther? Mark asked, his voice low as they moved down another hallway. Lyra glanced over at him, her face unreadable. We're close, she replied, her voice steady. But you need to be careful. Once we're out of here, we'll have no protection. Kaelor's people will be looking for us, and they won't stop until they find us. Mark nodded, understanding the danger. The station was vast, and their time here was limited. They had to move fast. As they reached a maintenance door near the back of the station, Lyra paused and turned to Mark. This is where we part ways, she said quietly. Mark looked at her in confusion. What do you mean? We're not splitting up now, are we? Lyra gave him a serious look. We need to. I'll draw their attention away from you. You're still human, and they won't expect you to get away. If I can keep them distracted, you'll have a better chance of getting to the escape pods undetected. Mark hesitated. No, we stick together. We do this as a team. Lyra shook her head. You don't understand. They won't stop coming after me. And if you're caught, you'll be as much of a target as I am. The only way you'll have a chance to survive is if you go alone. Mark didn't want to argue. He didn't want to leave her behind, but he also understood the truth of what she was saying. They couldn't both run, not in a place like this. The stakes were too high. "All right," Mark said, his voice quiet. "But I'll be back for you. I won't leave you here." Lyra looked at him, and for the first time there was a faint smile on her lips. "Good luck, Mark, and don't do anything foolish." With that, she slipped through the maintenance door, disappearing into the shadows. Mark watched her go for a moment, then turned and sprinted in the opposite direction. He had no time to waste. The escape pods were just a few levels below, but getting there was going to be far from easy. As he moved quickly through the corridors, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The air seemed to hum with the tension of their situation. The station was quiet, almost too quiet. It felt as though everyone had been waiting for this moment, for the moment when he would finally break free. Suddenly, a loud alarm blared, echoing through the halls. Mark's heart skipped a beat. "Too late," he muttered to himself. The station was on high alert. He knew that the moment the alarm sounded, it wouldn't be long before the hunters arrived. He had to move faster. He rounded a corner and found himself in front of the entrance to the escape pods. His heart raced as he pushed open the door and stepped into the small control room. The only problem now was that the pods were secured. The console in front of him was locked, and he didn't have the clearance to open it. He could hear footsteps approaching, growing louder with each passing second. Panic started to rise within him. Think, he muttered to himself. Without wasting another moment, Mark reached into his jacket and pulled out the small device he had been given by one of the station's technicians weeks ago. It was a hacking tool designed to bypass security systems. He hadn't had the chance to use it until now, but now was as good a time as any. His hands shook slightly as he connected the device to the console. The screen flickered and buzzed for a moment, then displayed the familiar system login prompt. "You can do this," Mark whispered, feeling the pressure building. He typed quickly, entering the override codes the technician had given him. The device hummed as the system fought against him, but after a few tense seconds, a green light blinked on the screen. The escape pods were unlocked. Mark wasted no time. He sprinted toward the closest pod, his breath coming in short gasps. The alarms were still blaring, and he knew he didn't have much time before they reached him. As he climbed into the pod and sealed the hatch behind him, he glanced out of the small window. He could see the distant stars twinkling in the blackness of space. The vast emptiness felt like a reminder of everything that was at stake. "Lyra, I'll come back for you," he whispered under his breath. The pod shot forward, rocketing away from the station. Mark could feel the vibrations of the engine as it burned through the atmosphere, his pulse quickening with the adrenaline. He had escaped, but the hardest part was just beginning. He couldn't help but think about Lyra. She had given him the chance to escape, but at what cost? She was still on the station, and he had no idea if she had managed to slip away unnoticed. His thoughts were interrupted as the pod veered sharply to the left, its course adjusting automatically to avoid an incoming obstacle. Mark held his breath, staring out of the window. He had made it out, but the galaxy was a dangerous place, and now he was no longer just a diplomat, he was a fugitive. The hunt had begun. Mark sat in the small, cramped escape pod, his hands gripping the controls as he tried to steady his breath. The stars outside raced past him, streaks of light in the dark void of space. His heart was still pounding from the chaos of the escape. He had made it out of the station, but the question still lingered in his mind. Had Lyra made it out too? The pod systems beeped, pulling him out of his thoughts. The control panel showed a steady trajectory away from the station. He was safe, for now. But there was still so much to figure out. He glanced at the small, dimly lit cabin behind him, where Lyra had been sitting just hours earlier. Mark hadn't seen much of her since they parted ways in the station's maintenance room. He had hoped that she would find a way to escape as well, but the uncertainty of it all gnawed at him. His only choice now was to keep moving forward. He didn't know what the future held, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Lyra was more than just a captive, a pawn in someone else's game. She had secrets she had kept hidden, even from him. The sudden buzz of the pod's communication system broke his train of thought. He reached out and activated the screen, surprised to see a message blinking from a secure channel. It was from Lyra. Mark's heart skipped a beat. He quickly pressed a button to open the message. Her voice came through the speakers, calm but urgent. "Mark, if you're receiving this, then you've escaped. I hope you are safe. But I have something to tell you. Something you need to know." He leaned forward, hanging on her every word. "The truth is, I wasn't just any prisoner. I'm not just some political pawn. My bloodline is special. My family was once powerful. We controlled something ancient, something dangerous." Mark stared at the screen, his mind racing. He had suspected Lyra was more than she seemed, but hearing it from her made it real. "The device Kalor's people gave you, the one that helped you escape, it's no coincidence. My people have been searching for it for centuries. It holds the key to an ancient weapon. A weapon that can change the balance of power in the galaxy. The reason they wanted me? It's because I am the only one who can activate it. And now that you have freed me, you are in danger." "We both are." Mark's hands tightened around the controls. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. A weapon that could change the galaxy. He had no idea how deep this went. He had thought he was just helping an innocent woman escape from the grasp of a powerful man. But now, it seemed like he had become a part of something far bigger than he could have imagined. "The reason I didn't tell you everything before, I couldn't risk it. I didn't want to drag you into this, but now I have no choice. You need to understand that Kalor is not just a powerful leader. He is after something far greater than just political power. He is after the weapon that my family hid away centuries ago. He wants control, and he will stop at nothing to get it." Mark sat back in his seat, staring at the screen in disbelief. The weight of her words settled heavily on his chest. He had thought he was just doing the right thing by freeing Lyra, but now it felt like he had unleashed a storm he couldn't control. "I don't know where you are, but I'm going to find you. We have to move fast, Mark. Kaler's people will be hunting us down, and they won't stop until they find us. Trust no one. You need to keep the device safe." The message ended abruptly, leaving Mark in stunned silence. He replayed it in his mind, trying to understand everything she had said. She wasn't just an innocent woman. She was the key to something powerful, something dangerous. And now, he was involved whether he liked it or not. He had always believed in doing the right thing, in standing up for what was just. But this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. The stakes were higher than ever. Mark glanced at the small map on the pod's console, showing the vast emptiness of space. He had no idea where to go from here. There was no one to turn to for help, no allies, just him and the unknown. He took a deep breath and made a decision. If he was going to survive this, if he was going to help Lyra and stop Kaler, he needed to find out more. He needed to learn about the weapon and why it was so important. And to do that, he would have to find Lyra. With newfound determination, Mark set the course for a nearby planet, hoping it would lead him to answers. But as he activated the pod's thrusters, he felt a strange sense of unease. Something was watching him. The feeling didn't go away as he sped through space, his eyes scanning the stars outside the small window. He couldn't shake the sense that something was following him. He kept his hand on the control panel, his fingers tense as the pod moved steadily through the dark expanse of the galaxy. Hours passed before he received another message, this one on a secure line. It was from an unknown sender. "Mark, you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." The voice was unfamiliar, cold, calculated. A shiver ran down his spine. Lyra was never meant to be freed. She is part of something bigger, something you don't understand. The moment you helped her, you sealed your fate. You're not the first to try and stop Kalor, but you'll be the last. If you want to live, you'll return the device to its rightful owner. Otherwise, we will make sure you never see the light of day again. Mark's stomach twisted. Who was this? Who knew about the device? And how had they found him so quickly? He shut off the comms, his heart racing. It was clear now that Kalor wasn't just a political leader. He was a shadow looming over everything, and Mark had unknowingly walked right into his path. The stakes were higher than he could ever have imagined, and now he had no choice but to move forward. He wasn't going to stop. He couldn't. Not now. The truth was out there, and he had to find it. For Lyra, for the galaxy. Mark set the pod's course to the planet ahead, ready to face whatever dangers lay in his path. He had no allies, no plan. But one thing was clear. He would stop at nothing to uncover the truth. The planet Mark had set course for was a barren one, a rocky, desolate place far from the bustling trade routes of the galaxy. Its surface was cracked and lifeless, with only the faintest traces of ancient ruins scattered across the landscape. As his escape pod descended through the atmosphere, Mark couldn't help but wonder if he had made a mistake. This place seemed like an abandoned world, one forgotten by time. But Lyra's message had given him no other choice. She had said to keep moving, to never stop running, and now he had no choice but to follow her lead. The pod landed with a soft thud, its landing gear making a faint scraping sound against the rocky ground. Mark looked out the small viewport, scanning the horizon. The skies above were cloudy, the air thick with the scent of dust and ash. It felt like a place where secrets could be hidden, where things had been buried for centuries. He sat in the pod for a moment, unsure of what to do next. Lyra had told him to find answers, to search for the truth about the weapon and what it meant for the galaxy. But there was a heavy silence now. He could feel it, an uneasy calm, like the calm before a storm. Mark turned to the small console beside him and opened a secure comm link to Lyra's channel. His fingers hovered over the controls, but there was no message this time. No communication. The screen stayed dark. He frowned, knowing that time was running out. He had no idea where Lyra was, or if she had made it off the station safely. He had to move quickly. He climbed out of the pod and stepped onto the planet's surface, his boots crunching against the rocky soil. The air was thin, and the wind howled across the barren landscape. There was nothing here but dust and ruins. Mark began walking, his mind focused on one thing, finding the answers. Lyra's warning echoed in his mind. The galaxy was on the brink of something far greater than anyone had imagined, and it was clear now that Kalor wasn't just a leader. He was hunting for something dangerous, something that could change everything. And Mark was tangled up in it. As he walked deeper into the ruins, he noticed something strange. There were symbols carved into the stone walls, faded, but still visible. The markings looked ancient, as if they belonged to a long-lost civilization. He stopped and studied them for a moment. They seemed familiar, but Mark couldn't place where he had seen them before. He had seen similar symbols on the device he had taken from the station, the one Lyra had warned him to protect. It was clear now that these ruins held something important. A low, rumbling noise suddenly broke the silence, and Mark spun around, his heart racing. In the distance, a cloud of dust rose from the horizon. It was moving toward him, and it was growing larger by the second. Mark's pulse quickened. He had been followed. He didn't have time to think. The threat was real, and it was coming fast. Mark ran toward the nearest structure, a tall, crumbling tower. It was his best chance for cover. He scrambled up the stone steps, his feet slipping on the uneven surface as he reached the top. The wind howled around him, but he didn't stop. He needed to find a way to survive. He couldn't let them catch him. Not now, not when the truth was so close. From the top of the tower, he could see the approaching force clearly. It was a small group of heavily armed soldiers, their sleek black armor reflecting the faint light of the planet's distant sun. Kalor's soldiers. Mark's heart sank. He knew they would be relentless in their pursuit, but he wasn't going down without a fight. Mark quickly scanned the area around him, looking for anything that could help him. His eyes landed on an old metal door at the base of the tower. It looked like it hadn't been opened in years, but it was his only option. He dashed toward it, kicking the door open with all his strength. It creaked and groaned, but finally gave way, revealing a narrow passage leading deep underground. Mark hesitated for only a moment. The soldiers were getting closer. He had no choice. He dove into the dark passage, the door slamming shut behind him. The air inside was damp and cold, and the darkness seemed to swallow him whole. He fumbled for his flashlight, turning it on, and shining it down the corridor. The passage seemed to stretch on forever, winding its way deeper into the planet's core. Mark's heart raced as he moved forward, knowing that the soldiers would soon be on his trail. He had to find what he came for. He had to find the truth. As he ventured deeper, the walls of the passage began to change. The stone became smoother, the markings on the walls more distinct. It was clear now. This wasn't just a natural cave. It was an ancient structure, one built by a civilization long lost to time. And it was here, in this forgotten place, that the answers lay. He walked for what felt like hours, until finally he reached a large chamber. The walls were covered in more symbols, more markings, and in the center of the room stood a pedestal. On it, covered in dust and cobwebs, was an ancient relic, a device that looked similar to the one he had taken from the station. Mark's breath caught in his throat. This was it. This was what Kalor had been searching for. But as he stepped closer, a voice echoed through the chamber, sending a chill down his spine. "Mark." He spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. Standing in the shadows was a figure, a woman, her silhouette barely visible in the dim light. It took a moment for Mark to recognize her. It was Lyra. "Lyra!" Mark exclaimed, his voice filled with relief. He rushed toward her, but she raised a hand to stop him. "Don't," she said, her voice cold and distant. "You don't understand. It's too late." Mark's heart sank. "What do you mean? We can stop him. We can stop Kalor." Lyra shook her head slowly. "You don't realize the full extent of what you're involved in. Kalor isn't the real enemy. There's something much darker behind this, something we can't stop, not now, not anymore." Mark felt the weight of her words sink in. Everything he had fought for, everything he had believed, was starting to unravel before his eyes. The truth was more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. The relic on the pedestal hummed softly, as if acknowledging their presence. Mark knew one thing for sure. The final stand was only just beginning. The chamber was silent save for the faint hum of the ancient relic on the pedestal. Mark stood frozen, staring at Lyra, his heart heavy with confusion. Her words hung in the air like an unspoken threat. "You don't understand," she repeated, her voice colder than he had ever heard it. This wasn't about Kalor, it was never about him. Mark took a step forward, his mind racing. The pieces of the puzzle that had seemed so clear now blurred into a mess of uncertainty. The relic on the pedestal called to him, its dark energy almost tangible in the air. The room itself seemed to pulse with it. "What are you saying?" Mark asked, his voice low and filled with disbelief. "You told me to run, to escape. You said Kalor was after this. After us." Lyra's expression softened, but only slightly. "I didn't want you to know. I didn't want you to be part of this. But now there's no choice. The weapon Kalor seeks is not just any weapon. It's a power that was sealed away long ago, buried beneath these ruins. My people, my ancestors, hid it here because they knew the cost of wielding it." Mark could feel the weight of her words pressing against him. It wasn't just about a political fight or an enemy leader. The stakes were much higher. The weapon in front of him was a force of unimaginable power, and Lyra was somehow connected to it. "So what is it?" Mark asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "What is this weapon?" Lyra's eyes flickered with a strange mix of fear and sadness. "It's not a weapon like you've seen before. It doesn't kill. It changes everything. It alters reality itself, bending time and space to the will of the one who controls it. That's why Kalor wants it. He believes that with it, he can reshape the galaxy, create a new order under his rule." Mark's mind spun. He had known that the galaxy was full of power struggles, but he hadn't realized the kind of power they were dealing with. This wasn't just about control. This was about something much darker, something that could rewrite the very laws of existence. "But why did you keep this from me?" Mark demanded, stepping closer. "Why didn't you tell me from the start?" Lyra looked away, her eyes filled with pain. "Because I didn't want to put you in danger. I thought I could stop it on my own." But the more I ran, the more I realized I couldn't do it without help. And now, you're here. You're part of this whether you want to be or not. Mark's chest tightened. He had been dragged into this, yes, but he wasn't ready to back down, not now. Not when he could see the power that lay in front of them, waiting to be claimed. What do we do now? Mark asked, his voice resolute. Lyra's eyes met his again, and for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope in them. Now, we stop him. We destroy the weapon before anyone can use it. It's the only way. Mark didn't hesitate. Then, let's do it. But before they could move, the sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. Mark turned sharply, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. The chamber door burst open, and in walked a group of soldiers, led by none other than Kalor himself. You thought you could hide from me? Kalor's voice was cold and mocking, filled with arrogance. You thought you could escape with this power? No one escapes from me, not even you, Lyra. Mark stepped in front of Lyra instinctively, his body tense, ready for whatever came next. But Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly calm. Don't, she whispered. He can't touch us here. Kalor laughed, a cruel sound that echoed off the walls. You think you can stop me? You who barely understand the power you're dealing with? Mark stood his ground. We'll do whatever it takes to stop you. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes never leaving Kalor's. You don't understand, Kalor. This weapon isn't for the taking. No one can control it, not even you. Kalor's smile faltered, just for a moment. But then he raised his hand, signaling for his soldiers to step forward. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Kalor growled. The weapon will be mine. And once it is, the galaxy will bow to me. The tension in the room thickened. Mark could feel the danger, the inevitability of the moment. It felt like everything was about to change, whether they were ready or not. The relic hummed louder, its power almost a living thing, responding to the conflict unfolding in the chamber. Lyra glanced at Mark, her expression determined. We have to act now. If he activates the weapon, it will be too late. Mark nodded. Together they moved toward the pedestal, but before they could get closer, Kalor shouted in fury, ordering his soldiers to advance. They raised their weapons, aiming directly at Mark and Lyra. But in that moment, something unexpected happened. The relic on the pedestal flared to life, a burst of energy sweeping across the room. The soldiers were thrown back, their weapons slipping from their hands as the power of the relic surged. Mark felt the energy pulse through him, his body vibrating with the force of it. For a split second, time seemed to slow. He could see the entire room, Kalor, Lyra, and the relic, all frozen in place. Then, with a deafening roar, the energy exploded outward, enveloping the entire chamber in a blinding light. When the light faded, Mark opened his eyes, blinking against the after effects. The soldiers were gone, the room was still, and Kalor was on his knees, his hands raised as if in surrender. Mark looked around, confusion filling his mind. Had they done it? Had they stopped him? Lyra stood beside him, her face pale but relieved. It's over, she whispered. We've done it. Mark's heart pounded in his chest. It was over, but at what cost? The power of the relic had changed everything. And though Kalor had been defeated, the weapon's true nature was still unknown. Lyra turned to Mark, her eyes filled with gratitude and something else, something deeper. You've saved us all, Mark. But this is just the beginning. We've stopped Kalor, but there are others who will want the power, and will need to protect it. Mark nodded, understanding. We'll protect it. Together. With that, they walked out of the chamber, leaving behind the relic that had nearly destroyed them all. But as they stepped into the light of a new dawn, they knew that their fight wasn't over. The galaxy was vast, and many challenges lay ahead. But for now, they were together, and that was enough. That was